Hi, my name is Victoria, and I just finished my first year as an undergrad at Oxford studying philosophy, politics, and economics. And I'm basically going to walk you through the past year to help you get a better idea of what it's like to be a student at Oxford. First, just to make a distinction, Oxford is the university, but Oxford is composed of like 30-something undergrad colleges, and each one has its own dining hall, its own tutors, which are professors. It has its accommodations, its grounds, and that is basically where students spend their time. So they go to a college at the University of Oxford. You don't just go to like Oxford generally. The academic year at Oxford is composed of 3 terms. So you have Michaelmas, Hilary, and Trinity. Each term is 8 weeks long. Usually students arrive during 0th week though, and then there are 6 weeks between the terms. So the breaks are quite long, but the term time is very intense. So the first term of the year is Michaelmas. It starts in the beginning of October. As a fresher, which is what they call first year undergrads, you show up during 0th week, and you have a whole orientation week where they have you get to know everyone, get to know what it's like to be a student there, and you get to meet your college family, which is basically this system that most Oxford colleges have, where as a student you get assigned a student in the year above you who's in your course ideally, and hopefully has some traits that are similar to you, and they sort of mentor you or provide a source of information for you as you settle into your life at Oxford. Then as a first year, you get like married to just any of your friends, and then you can become college parents, and then you'll get your children assigned to you once you start your second year. So I have 3 college spouses, I guess you would say. Obviously it's not like a romantic thing, it's just these are some of my best friends. We're like college married, and then we'll have the chance to do family things with the freshers we get assigned when we go back in the fall. During Freshers Week, they will have maybe like a fair for the different clubs surrounding the college. You can go to the university-wide Freshers Fair. You will usually have a meeting where you meet the tutors. The tutors are basically your professors. They are who you'll have tutorials with, which is the whole Oxford tutorial system, where about every week you go and you bring either an essay or a problem sheet that you worked on, and you talk it through with your tutors. And it's more of like a dynamic conversation to really push the way you think, more so than like here's a grade, here's what you're supposed to do. There were also bops and like parties and a lot of social stuff. Bops are just like a party hosted by the college, and a lot of different social things happening in the first week. Also, obviously, in the UK, drinking is legal from 18, so alcohol is like at almost every event at Oxford. At the end of the first week of like lectures, tutorials, coursework, once that started, at the end of the first week, you have your matriculation, where you wear your subfusk that hopefully you picked up during Freshers Week, which is your gown, your mortarboard, and then ribbon or tie, and just a white shirt, and then a skirt or trousers that have to be black, and then black shoes and tights. And matriculation is basically just a ceremony where you become officially a student. You walk down to the Sheldonian, you could wear your mortarboard, which you don't get to wear again until you graduate, and you become officially a student of the university. Throughout Michaelmas term is a great time to explore different clubs and societies. I tried out rowing, which I have stuck with, and now I'm going to be vice captain next year, which is super fun. You'll probably have some kind of initiations, either with your subject or your course, which I wasn't really prepared for, but usually, hopefully, they're just like funny little activities that you get to go around the university doing. And then there are some holidays in Michaelmas. So obviously there's Halloween, which is mostly just like a clubbing event. There's the 5th of November, which is Bonfire Night or Guy Fawkes Night. There is Thanksgiving. If you're an American like me, my warden hosted a Thanksgiving dinner that I was invited to, which was very nice. And also like Hall just served a Thanksgiving formal for anyone who booked on. And then there's Oxmas, which is basically like the Christmas season, but because the end of term is quite early, I think it's at the beginning of December, you can't really celebrate Christmas while you're there, so they have Oxmas, where like the chapel will have events, they'll put up a Christmas tree, and they'll have usually a Christmas like Sunday dinner in Hall. The second term of the year is Hillary. It starts mid-January, and it's historically just kind of the worst term of the year. The weather isn't great. It's very rainy. You can't really do much. Like, my whole rowing season got canceled because the river flooded. It's not the most happy time of year, which they do have. Like, fifth week blues is a term that they have where, like, each term by fifth week, there's a lot of pressure from the work. You haven't been home for a while, and so you'll get like fifth week blues, and they'll usually try to have some welfare events to bring up people's spirits. But Hillary, just kind of the whole term, is sad, although I had a great Hillary, so it doesn't have to bring you down. But some of the fun holidays that they have in Hillary are Burns Night, where you get to have haggis and do like the ode to the haggis and try it, which is really fun. There's Shrove Tuesday, which is like Mardi Gras, Pancake Day, the day before Lent starts, and then the whole like Lent season starts on the Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, which is actually quite a fun thing to do. The choir and chapels at Oxford are really nice. Even if you aren't religious, it's a great place to go just because it's so beautiful, and the choirs are usually quite good. And they have a lot of events with like also refreshments if you want that. And then in Hillary, there's, for the big rowing event, Torpids, which didn't happen my year because the rowing river flooded, but it's usually a fun event. And then they have like St. Patrick's Day is at the very end of term, so sometimes that happens, like celebrations, sometimes not really. Hillary, there's just not a ton happening. There might be some balls, some other events, but besides that, it's mostly just like your prime working time. Over the Easter vac, if you're interested in rowing, there's the boat race between Cambridge and Oxford that happens, and I also went to a rowing camp, so some colleges will have different camps or trainings that they'll do during the vacs. The third term of the year is Trinity, which is mostly a revision term where people are quite stressed. It's still a very fun time because the weather's better, but if you're in first year, you have exams at the end of your first year called prelims, which they don't count towards your final grade for like your degree, but they are very important because if you fail them, you have to resit them, and if you fail your resit, you don't get to come back to the school. And because you haven't had any real grades or tests up to that point. So the structure of the academics at Oxford is that you have your tutorials each week, and in order to prepare for your tutorials where you have a discussion with your professor, you can go to lectures. Most lectures are more or less optional, or they'll have recordings, so it's not like overly necessary that you go. It is encouraged and it can really help, but most of your learning comes from you reading just on your own from the reading list that's assigned to you by your tutors. If you're in a STEM subject, you'll have labs and lectures as well, but you'll also have some kind of problem sheets to work through, and then you take your essay, tutorial sheet, whatever it is, you send it to your professor, and then they will sometimes give you a grade on it, but it's not a grade that counts towards anything. It's just like an approximation of how you're doing. Or they might just give you some comments on like, oh, work on this, ask you questions throughout the essay, which they might talk about more in your tutorial. So you don't get a grade really at all from your tutors. At the end of the term, you will get an evaluation of kind of like, oh, here's the mark that you would probably get based on your work on your prelims. And then at the beginning of each term, you have mock exams called collections that are put on by your college, where you go and you sit and basically have a mock exam to give you an idea of what it would be like, and those do get marked and graded. The grading scale at Oxford is quite interesting. Basically, a 40 is a pass, and then anywhere from a 50 to a 60 is a 2-2. Anywhere from a 60 to a 70 is a 2-1. And then 70 and up is a first, but no one really gets honestly above 75. I mean, maybe more so on STEM subjects where there's more maths involved, but if you're doing an essay subject, it's very hard to get above that. Anything above 80 is considered publishable, so you're not, like, no one's really getting in that, especially for a timed essay during a preliminary exam. Besides having all that pressure for your first Oxford exams during Trinity term, there are actually a lot of fun things happening. The weather is, like, really nice in Trinity, although we did have some heat waves this year, which was not ideal, especially considering that Oxford just doesn't have AC really at all. My college had a boat party where we went to London, and we got to go on a boat in the Thames. There's May Day, which is this holiday where on the last day of April, everyone stays up all night to hear the choir sing from the Magdalen Tower, which is fun, but, like, it's really hard to stay up all night. So some people just wake up early to go listen to that. There was Beating of the Bounds was a random one that I went to, where they had the school boys go around to all these, like, marks throughout old center of Oxford, and, like, they hit it and mark it. That's like some kind of religious holiday. There's Summer Eights, which even if you don't do rowing, this is a really big social event, so everyone goes down to the river, to the boathouses. There's usually, like, drinks and, burgers on the grill, and everyone watches the races to see which college will get headship, which college will bump every day. It's really fun, so definitely do that. And then a lot of colleges also have garden parties throughout the term, and at the end of the term there are commemoration balls, which are really fancy white tie events where, like, there are fireworks, there are performers. I didn't go to one this year, but they are very expensive but also very fun, I've heard. Then once prelims happen, you have your carnation that you wear for prelims, which is white for your first exam, pink for your exams in the middle, and then red for your final exam. And then after that, people do this thing called trashing, where they'll get paint powder and throw it at each other, and then they'll jump in the river. This was actually, like, kind of forbidden by the Oxford City Council during my year, so it didn't happen so much, but it is a fun thing to do if you're allowed to do it. If you are thinking of applying to Oxford, or you will be attending it this coming fall, there are a few things to know. One, you definitely need to be self-motivated. I had maybe 3-4 contact hours with tutors a week, and then I also had lectures on top of that. But there are only, like, a few hours a week where you actually need to be there and you will be held accountable. And especially also given that you don't get grades, it can feel easy to kind of slack off on an essay or not do it very well, which isn't ideal for your academic performance. So you need to be very self-driven, make your own schedule, and stick to it. I found that there was a pretty good work-life balance. Then again, my subject doesn't have a lot of contact hours, so it was kind of up to me to make sure that I was spending enough time on my work, and also making sure that I finished it in a short enough amount of time that I had time to do other things. I was very involved in rowing. I rowed or had practice of some sort almost every day. A note from my warden, which is, like, the head of the college, is that you should have one athletic sort of activity and one academic activity, which I think is a good way to think about it, to make sure you're doing enough but also not doing too much. I think a lot of people had good work-life balance, but it can be very easy to just either spend all your time working in the library and just only coming out to eat and to sleep, or to spend very little time in the library because you don't have a lot of contact hours and you think, oh, I can just write an essay in a few hours and it'll be fine. Because of all the work that people have, meals are going to be your social time. So in hall, colleges only have one hall each, which is where you can go and you get your meals. There's no kind of meal plan, so it's up to you if you want to eat there or not. You can always go out and eat. Oxford isn't that affordable of a city to be doing that. Honestly, like, hall meals, how good they are and how expensive they are is very dependent on what college you go to. But your hall is where a ton of people will be there eating, and, like, your friend group will socialize, because since everyone else has work so much of the time, you will sometimes only see people at meals. Because the breaks between terms are so long, your accommodation and your lease might not include those break times, so that would mean that you have to move out every term. Even if you're living in the same room all 3 terms, you have to move your stuff out between them. There's usually some kind of storage provided for it by the college or that you can find around the city, but it does pose a little bit of a complication for moving stuff in and out, and it means that you probably shouldn't bring as much stuff like decor-wise or whatnot, because you're just going to have to bring it out after every 8 weeks. While it can definitely be stressful, I had a great time at my first year at Oxford, and I'm excited for the next 2 years to come.